Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. I would love for you to help us spread the word by leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts so that other innovators like you can find us. Did you know that you are a part of a global community? That's right. We have over 70 plus countries listening from around the world. Today, we want to welcome Luxembourg to the list of countries listening. Well, my guest today is Jason Montoya. Jason grows small business owners, teams, and incomes from Atlanta, Georgia. And he's a freelance consultant since 2014. He is the author of 2 books, one for aspiring freelancers, The Path of the Freelancer, and another for striving for small businesses, which is The Jump. On his blog and on his podcast, Share Life Podcast, which I had the immense pleasure of being on, you can visit that at jasonscottmontoya.com. Jason shares stories and systems that help people live better and work smarter. He also lives with his wonderful wife and 5 children. That's so amazing, in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Well, thanks for having me, Natalie. Yes, there are 5 little ones running around.
That's so amazing. Well, I can tell you this, like 2020, something happened, right? And what we found was that this whole brand new world opened to everybody, which was like the world of the freelance economy. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about that today, because it's not a topic we've had on the podcast. And I think it's something that people are either very curious about or maybe they're stepping into. But there's this whole idea of like this movement towards work anywhere, live anywhere, and freelancing really provides some of that freedom. So I'd love to just talk a little bit about how you got started on your freelancing journey.
Yeah. So, it's definitely an interesting, in terms of the pandemic and that shift, because a lot of the changes that are advantageous to freelancing were made. So like working remotely or virtually, that became more prominent during the pandemic shift. And so that's sort of one of the things that I realized when the pandemic hit was that the transition to freelancing that I had made in 2014 actually prepared me for the pandemic. So when it hit, I was already ready for it. So that worked out really well. But I actually freelanced in different ways. I had a marketing agency from 2007 to 2014. But before that, I did a little bit of freelancing just as a contractor doing different things. And that kind of evolved into what became my marketing company. And so when there's kind of a whole story about that company and the transitions and transformations that I went through and the company went through. But at the end of the story, what I had come to realize is that what I wanted to be when I grew up was not to be an agency owner. So I decided to shut down the company. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, because a lot of my passion is around the storytelling and the writing and the books and the podcasting. But at the same time, I did have a wife and 5 kids, although not all 5 were out at the time. They were coming to a theater near you. But anyway, I had to figure out what to do. And so freelancing actually found me first. So when I was shutting down the company, I really wanted to end it well. And as part of that, I engaged in my community and just started meeting with people and getting their feedback, letting them know what's going on. And within a month of shutting down my company, I had about 8 or 9 freelancing projects on my plate.
Wow.
And I didn't seek it out. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to shut down the company and become a freelancer. It was like, hey, I don't know what to do next. And people were like, hey, well, before you figure that out, can I contract you? So before I knew it, I was freelancing. 8 months into that, but at the end of 2014, I realized, wow, this is working. I'm making money. It was a bit chaotic because I didn't know that I was going to be a freelancer permanently. So I started to take the systems and ideas and lessons learned from the business and apply it to my freelancing. And so in 2015, I really got the systems in place and got things figured out. And then I had other freelancers say, hey, could you help me? And I started coaching freelancers. And eventually that led to me publishing the book in 2017, which, all that whole journey really prepared me for the pivot in 2020 when the pandemic hit. I was already ready for it. So,
well, let's talk a little bit about, like, you said that, you kind of started to apply some of the systems and things. Talk about what would be like 2 or 3 of the systems that helped you kind of ground yourself as a freelancer, so that because it was so crazy at that time.
I think when we're running a business and we have a staff and there's payroll and there's all these stresses, it can it makes it hard to think. So one of the things I wanted to do in the beginning of my freelancing, or as early as possible, was to do the thinking. And so I took the lessons. Some of them were financial. So for example, I know there's a roller coaster when it comes to being a freelancer or a business, where you're going to have months where you have a lot of clients and a lot of work, and months where you don't. You're going to have clients that pay and clients that don't. Some that pay late, some that pay early. So that roller coaster was something I knew was going to come, and I knew there's ways to manage that. So one of them was what I call it my water tower system, but essentially it's an emergency savings, and it was a $15,000 amount of money. And I wanted to have that amount of money that was sort of the buffer between the chaos of entrepreneurship and my personal life. And that would give us the stability that we didn't have to worry about bills coming in or not. And so we spent it. The interesting thing about setting a goal is that I was surprised, and people are often surprised how quickly you can get to a goal when you set the goal. So it took us about a year to get that $15,000 financial buffer. And when we got it, then it created that stability. And then as clients paid late or didn't pay, or client work went up and down, we had this buffer. So that was one of them. There are others that have to do with, figuring out what it is I do and who I do it for, articulating that, communicating it on my website, different sales activities, building sales into a predictable process. And we can probably dive into that when we talk about a steady stream of paying clients. But those are a couple tidbits that came out of that. But a lot of it was in my head, and I just had to get it out, and that's where that process unfolded.
That's really good. I feel like that's the challenge that most people have. It's in their head. They need help extracting that so they actually know what they're trying to do and why. And so I love that, because once you kind of put it down, it actually gives you the ability to run with whatever the vision is. But sometimes when the vision is stuck in our head, it doesn't enable the forward momentum we want. So let's think about that a little bit. So part of the forward momentum is being able to have this steady stream of clients that are paying. Let's talk a little bit about that. How do you build up to that? If someone's thinking about becoming a freelancer and that's their biggest fear, how do they start to think through how to begin to build that steady stream?
So I have in the book, you'll notice on the front of the cover, there are these 8 dots. And each of these dots represents one of the 8 achievements that I believe a freelancer has to maintain to succeed. And the third one is this building a steady stream of paying clients. And each of the way that the book design is really, if you want to read the whole thing, you can. But if you just want to get right to what it is your problem is, like, you can go to that. So each chapter you've got the 8 achievements, and then within each of the achievements, there's 4 checkpoints. And so when it comes to building a steady stream of paying clients, that's at a high level, it's about finding new projects. We need to find new projects, new problems to solve. We have solutions to solve those. And so we got to figure out, how do we find those? Sales needs to be identified, like I mentioned earlier, in a predictable process. And what I mean by that is, if you need to get 2 new clients a month, then there's probably a certain number of meetings you need. Maybe it's 5 meetings a month, because not all of those are going to become clients. And to get 5 meetings, you have to meet 20 people, right? So there's this, now I know that I need to meet 20 people a month, new people a month, to get my 2 new clients. And so now I have something that I can control, which is meeting those people. We also want to build a team of advocates, and then we also want to get to a place where referrals and leads actually seek us out. And when we've gotten there, that's when we're building that steady stream of paying clients. But it's important for us to understand how we go about selling. Some of us are what I call the grill seller. We're looking for the problem. We're out there and we're hustling, and we're finding the person or the company that needs what we offer, and we're getting them to act now. The other option is the crockpot seller. That's someone who's sort of stirring, they're marinating, maybe they're sending out emails or posting blogs. And this is something that I tend to prefer. And I think in the long term, I think a lot of freelancers tend to prefer it, is building that steady drip process. And I've had clients after a year. I've had a client even after 10 years. After 10 years of following my journey, is like, hey, I'm ready to work with you. So that I wouldn't underestimate the crockpot approach, and how that plays out.
It just can't be your only approach. You have to have many different...
especially when you're starting. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and I love what you said because you kind of just demystified it, right? Made it really simple because I think that we do overthink, and so I love the idea of meeting with 20 people. Also, you may hear certain people thinking right now, well, I'm not like a super duper salesperson, right? I'm not super salesy. Well, even the idea of at the end of that meeting saying, "Do you know anybody that would be a good fit for what I'm doing?" can be a lower barrier to entry than saying, all right, so are we doing this? Right. So
Yeah.
just even just thinking of ways that you can say it within your personality, I think are part of what make what you just shared with us super approachable. You talked a little bit about the types of achievements. I would love to dig into that a little bit more. I know that's directly from your book. Maybe we could share one or two other secrets, and then after that, people have to buy the book.
Well, the first one is being fully committed to freelance. And what that means is you're all in. Like, this is the road you're going down, and you might have to sort of set here's a point of no return, in the sense of, like, if it's not working, there is a point where you might not want to stop, but you have to be all in the sense of, when it gets tough, the way to kind of test ourselves is, think about when your bank account is empty and you don't have any work in front of you. Is your next thought, is your next action, should I go get a job, or should I get my next freelancing gig?
Wow.
And if it's to go get a job, it means you're not fully committed to freelance. And I think that is essentially the foundation of failure in freelancing, because when things get hard, we'll find a way to solve that problem. But if we're not all in, we're going to give up, and we may give up prematurely. And so I think that's the foundation that kind of undergirds the other 7 achievements. The second one is offerings are in a compelling package. The third, as we mentioned, is a steady stream of paying clients. The fourth is active clients are maximized. Fifth is we're unaffected by the roller coaster, as I mentioned earlier. 6 is wise and precise financial management. 7 is we've unified our personal and our work lives. And then number 8 is really about paying it forward and how do we teach others what we've learned. So again, there's a lot more to all 8 of them, and that's where people can kind of dive into that further if they want. But that's a quick summary of the 8 achievements.
That's great. What would you say when you're first starting out is the most important one? Is that number 3, where it's like the steady stream? Because the steady stream is really what keeps you alive. Or would you say maybe another one is important? And I'm thinking like in your first year of starting out as a freelancer.
Yeah. So I think number 3 is the one that everyone feels is the one that's the most important. So when I talk to freelancers, I say, which of these is the one you want to talk about most? That tends to be the one they want to talk about most. And I think it's because that's, you're trying to get new clients. The challenge as a freelancer is you're doing the work and you're selling. So you're selling yourself and doing the work. And that's one of the challenges of freelancing that some people may want to fully understand is part of their commitment, because they may come to realize that, hey, I love to do the work, but I don't really want to sell myself. And so maybe that's where those people, it would be better to be an employee versus freelancer. But getting that first, I think with number 3, if you're just starting out, getting that first client is a huge deal, right? Is this even like viable? And I remember the first when I had my marketing company, one of the things I did, and this kind of gets to the grill approach, I found this business directory. It was in Norcross, Georgia, and it was the Norcross Business Association, and it just had a list of all the businesses. So I just called every single one on that list. I said, "Do you need a website? Do you need a website?" And there was someone on the list that needed a website, and I said, I think it was like $1,500 or $1,200, and I said I need a half deposit, and they said, "Okay, where can you meet me?" And he gave me a deposit, and I started my first website.
That's amazing.
So that was probably, I don't know, 2006 or 7. But that was that win was like, okay, someone believed in me enough to pay me, and now I've begun. And the same thing happened when I shut down my marketing company and I shifted to freelancing, having those 8 projects on my plate. Again, it was like, okay, some people see the value in working with me, and that gives me the win to kind of continue that journey. And it might, because it might take someone 2 years to just get started, right? To get enough of a foundation to make that transition maybe from their job to freelancing. and to build a freelancing business. So.
Well, what I love about what we're talking about is, I know there's several people that are probably listening to this thinking, okay, I've thought about leaping or I've thought about making that jump. And what you're doing is just kind of helping them to put some language behind kind of what, needs to be done in order to get yourself out there. So I want to talk a little bit more about like, what are the pros and cons of freelancing? Like, because I think that's really a really important conversation for people to come in with eyes wide open, right? So there's tons of pros, which we can talk about, but I'm sure there's some cons too. And I would love to eyes wide open, help people take a look fully at freelancing.
I think to be fully committed, we have to know everything that's involved and to see not just the tip of the iceberg, the potential that excites us and gets us, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow and do this. We got to see the whole thing. And I think that's part of what the idea of the book is to give people a survey of like, to succeed, this is what's going to take. And are you willing to do that? And so I think one of the things to your question about like pros and cons, one of the things I think is super helpful is to recognize that in many ways, it comes down to what it is that we want. And more specifically, it comes down to how we want to get what we want. Wow. So what I mean by that is before I started freelancing, I thought I might have to go get a job. And as an entrepreneur, that was a difficult thing for me to swallow. But I realized that the reason it was difficult for me is because I did value that independence and I did value a bit of freedom that came with that, with being an entrepreneur. I didn't have to be kind of locked into a boss or system or authority. But the reality is as a freelancer or even a business owner, we actually are locked in. It's just a different type of locking. And so with my business, I had clients and a staff, and I did feel enslaved to the business in the earlier years. So just because you become an entrepreneur doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to be free. On the flip side, you can be, and this is one of the things I thought about that actually helped me become a better freelancer was how would I, as an employee, operate in such a way that I would have freedom? And I thought about the type of work I would do, the communication, the project management. And I thought if I did things in a certain way, that would give whoever I was working under or the company I was working for, that would actually give me the freedom I was looking for because I would be reliable and I would be trustworthy and I would get stuff done and they would know where I stood. And so that actually kind of created some ideas which I applied to my freelancing. So I think the fundamental thing to think about is why you want to freelance is a huge, important facet. And if you're going into freelancing as a way to escape something that you don't like with what you're doing, you may discover that same thing is in freelancing or entrepreneurship, and it sometimes may even be more severe. So it's one thing to have one boss kind of harping on you, but it's another to have 5 clients that are all upset with you.
Well, and I love that you helped to make that shift, because I do think that sometimes we may be interested in things for the wrong reason, but understanding that, the weight is different, but the weight shifts. And so you still have to kind of deal with that weight. I think that's a pretty important inflection point. I want to talk a little bit about, you talk a lot on your blog and things like that about how companies and freelancers can effectively work together. I would love to know just a little bit more about that. So
I think of it in a couple different ways. But one of the ways I think about it is in a kind of how we interface. And there's a couple stories about just ordering fast food that kind of helped me kind of put these together. But one time I went to Arby's and I had chaos in my car because I think the heater was going on, the radio was going on. I was trying to order, like I was not doing a good job of kind of keeping things orderly on my side. And their intercom was like gargly and it wasn't working. So I ordered my thing and they read it back to me, but I couldn't hear it. So I had no idea what was going on. I get up to the thing, I pay, I get my bag, I drive off and I look at the bag and it's like my order is completely wrong. So I have to go into the place and get the order corrected. And it was like a big old mess. So that's the chaos. That's when you got both the company and the freelancer, they're both in chaos and they meet together and it creates more chaos. And it's a miracle that everyone gets their money and they get their food. Now, the other option is what I call the bridge interface or the direct interface. So when you go to Chick-fil-A, they have a really good process and a good system, and they ask you, hey, what do you want? here's what I want. And they say, is that all? And they said, yeah. And then they say, my pleasure and all that. So you get up to the window, then they verify your order. So they have this process. And even though I might be in my own chaos, they're walking me through this process. So they're taking my chaos and they're filtering it into this reliable result, which is getting my food and them getting their money. The direct interface is kind of like that, but I essentially know what I know their process. So before they ask me the question, I give them their answers. Oh, hey, this is what I want. I want this on the side. These are the sauces I want. And I give them everything they are going to ask. So that's where we both understand the process and we work together. And I think that's a really helpful way to think about freelancing in companies is you got to get on the same page. You got to have the same language, and you got to speak in a way and then communicate what you're doing in that way. So one of the ways that we can do that is how we organize our projects. I use a framework called IDEMA, IDEMA. Everything starts out as an idea. So we ideate, then we discover that idea, then we execute that idea, then we maintain that idea, and we audit that idea. So it's these 5 stages. And that helps us. So when I'm working with the client, where are we at in this process? Am I stepping in from the beginning and kind of walking us through? Or is this a project that's already been planned and is in the middle of execution and you need me to help finish it? Is this something that's already been executed? It just needs to be maintained. And so that's one of the ways to get on the same page. There are other layers to it in terms of, we have good communication. We value the relationship. They're paying, as a freelancer, they're paying me on time. That's a good way for companies to work well with their freelancers. And also how we structure the engagement. I work in batches of 10 hours. I do hourly and I work in batches of 10 hours. And so how we work together, it creates its own dynamics and making sure we're on the same page as whether those the types of dynamics. But fundamentally, at the root level, it's about what is it you want and how do I help you get there? And then how do you operate within my own guidelines as a freelancer so that we set and enforce our boundaries. So we're both getting what we want. We're operating within virtuous interactions versus someone being taken advantage of or not. So that's a quick version of the answer to your question.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, final thoughts. As we close out our segment here today, I want to know, is freelancing the future of work? Be a futurist and tell me what you think.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting trends that are unfolding. And there's a couple quotes. There's one quote I'd like to bring up. This is from Blair Enns. He has a website called Win Without Pitching and has been highly influential in my own journey. But he talks about, so I'm just going to read this clip here, but roughly 1/3 of North American adults are self-employed in one way or another, and that number is projected to grow to be a majority of the workforce in just a few years. Some estimates put it at 70%. So that's a huge number of people that are freelancing and that are going to be, if it's even close to that. Now, he also talks about increasingly the state of employment is self-employment. I don't look to Karl Marx for ideas or models or anything, but I cannot shake the thought that his prediction that workers would ultimately own the means of production is coming true, if not via the path he envisioned. He might be horrified at the world where most people are capitalists in some form, although he would no doubt trumpet that in the United States of America, one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world, the move to solopreneurship has been expedited, and he talks about the expedition happening because of the Affordable Care Act. So a lot of people can now freelance because there's a way to get health insurance when you don't have a business that can afford that. So that was a really interesting thing. I did a survey a few years ago, and I discovered that in this survey, and it's a small segment, but it's 26% of people were freelancing, and 28% were freelancing, and 26% wanted to freelance. Wow. So that would put us a little bit above 50% if those people made that jump. So there definitely is a trend. I think because of social media, that trend seems to even be growing further, both people doing social media as a service, but also with YouTube and all these creative outlets. I think with ChatGPT, this is an interesting thing. I'm not a coder. I work on websites and stuff and do stuff for different clients, but I'm not a coder. Like I can't write PHP or JavaScript, but I had a client that needed something in JavaScript. And so with ChatGPT, I was able to ask ChatGPT to write the code for me, and I just installed it.
Wow.
And all of a sudden now I'm a coder, even though I don't know how to code. So that opens up the possibilities for entrepreneurs. The easier and lower bar that it takes to do these creative things and to execute, is going to make it more possible for freelancers. So I definitely see, in many ways, it's the future. In America's, like Blair Ann says, in America's spirit of entrepreneurship, that seems like the inevitable end. I think a lot of people just need to recognize, like what we talked about earlier, in terms of it's not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet. In many ways, it is hard. And that difficulty may be something you want in terms of the trade-offs, but just understanding that reality, I think, just will help people to be better equipped when they make that leap, and be more likely to succeed when they do that.
That's so cool. Where can people find and follow you?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about Path of the Freelancer, I do have a website set up for that. It's pathofthefreelancer.com. And on the website, I've got tons and tons of free resources and videos and articles and links and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you want to check that out, pathofthefreelancer.com is the place to go. My personal site is jasonscottmontoya.com. On that website, I've got my blogs. I've got links to different courses I have, books. My second book is for striving small businesses. I also have a podcast called the Share Life Podcast, and so I'm blogging and have a lot of activity going there. And then I'm on the social media at different outlets like LinkedIn, Twitter, and LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So you can find me on those places as well.
Awesome. All the things, all the places.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time today. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Natalie.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. And remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.